On April 18th, Nintendo announced that the new Switch 2 pre-orders will now begin on April 25th, with the June 5th launch date remaining the same, which is great news for us. Unfortunately, the base price for the console, bundles, and launch games remain the same, although there is a general $5 to $10 increase for the accessories, which is likely them trying to maintain their profit margins, while I suspect absorbing some of the costs with the reciprocal tariffs the Trump administration is levying. And so I want to explain to you all smart gamers out there on why, on a deeper level, Nintendo is actually taking a very risky business and political gamble that could severely hurt the company and the Switch 2 success. So to understand why this is a risky bet, you want to understand what is happening between the US and Japan right now. President Trump's global tariffs, which placed a 24% levy on Japan's exports, are on pause right now for 90 days, although there is still a 10% baseline tariff in place. This reprieve is meant to give countries time to make a deal with the US to address their concerns and in return have the tariffs be dropped. On April 16th, it was reported that Japan's chief negotiator, Ryosei Akazawa, kicked up discussions directly with President Trump, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and Trade Representative Jameson Greer, with the US side raising concerns about perceived unfairness in Japan's exports. Now, there hasn't been any concrete deals made, but President Trump has come out saying there was a big progress, and according to Japan's delegation, there are preparations for a second round of negotiations. But essentially what the US wants from Japan is to have agreements that they will be a military ally with the US against China and work together to economically pressure them. They also want Japan to buy more US goods, and they also want more investment into the US and or establish production lines in the US. For example, Honda making their hybrid Civic production in the US, and quite possibly working towards making the US dollar weaker. A weaker dollar means the US exports would be cheaper. And of any country out there, Japan is probably the most amicable to make a deal with the US. But Japan has been very clear that eliminating all tariffs is non-negotiable, and they know that Trump is in a situation where he wants to have results that he can claim wins before the US midterm elections next year, given the heat that he and the Republican Party are getting from the American people for all the turmoil these past recent months. So Nintendo, a huge global company and iconic brand of Japan, absolutely is aware of the Japanese government's efforts and is preemptively taking this as a sign that perhaps their government will be able to broker a deal with the 90-day grace period, which is probably how long their roughly 746,000 units of the Switch 2 already in the US is going to last. Lo and behold, 2 days later on April 18th, Nintendo announces the new pre-order start date, April 25th. So why is this a gamble by Nintendo? Well, even with the somewhat optimistic news, it is still very possible no deal or a less than desirable deal is made, because there are people in Japan that are very vocal about the Trump administration's aggressive tactics.
アメリカで言ってくるともう無理難題だし、もう理論もめちゃくちゃだし、何の整合性もないわけですよ。だけど言ってきてることに対して日本が交渉する場合においてですよ。はっきり言えば不良少年のカツアゲに近いですからね。これ言うこと聞いちゃって駆け引きだディールだっつって無理筋を逆に日本が折れちゃったらこれ慣例として過去例として良くないものを作るんですよ。カツアゲするやつでお金得ちゃったらまたカツアゲに来ますから。
And like I mentioned earlier, to Japan is either no tariffs or no deal at all. In addition, the currency exchange between the US dollar and yen are on very shaky ground right now, with both fluctuating against each other in the past few days, depending on what's happening in the news between the two. Depending on whether the yen gets stronger or not, there will be an effect on Nintendo's profit margins. And the most important gamble of them all is Nintendo's primary production of the Switch 2 is still in Vietnam, which Trump placed a whopping 46% tariff. Even if they were to try to diversify away from Vietnam, it would take time to ramp up production, and what country could they go to that Trump didn't already put a tariff on? Could they even have the trust and confidence that that country could successfully negotiate with Trump? That's a big risk that they could not control, and every business prefers environments that's predictable. So Nintendo is banking not on just the Japanese government to be successful in its deal making, but Vietnam's government as well. The best case scenario for Nintendo is this. Japan brokers a deal that allows the tariffs to drop and gets Trump to specifically exclude Nintendo from the tariffs so that their products, regardless of where they're manufactured, aren't hit with the levies. Worst case, Japan sells all their existing units that's already in the US. Vietnam still has their 46% tariff. Nintendo then has to increase their Switch 2 prices. Consumers avoid buying Switch 2. Nintendo suffers financially, and of course, we gamers are given the short end of the stick of everything, right? Alright everyone, that's all I have for you for now. If you like what you heard and want to have a discussion, like, subscribe, and leave a comment so we can get a debate going. This is very exciting stuff. Until next time.